I really wanted to kill him, and I most probably would have.
And within one throw, I was on the other side of the room, and then he was just bang, bang.
I remember how angry I was, jealous I was.
We were both asking ourselves very, very serious questions back then about who we were and where we were going to end up in this life.
I'd like to bring Norm Hewitt and Lorenn Walker to the stage.
So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. There were moments in there that I continue to bring back to a reality, and I still think my father, but I must acknowledge Manu. I must acknowledge just not Manu, but Manu's whānau. We had a screening at one of Peter Jackson's theatres, and I think it was Sir Richard Taylor's in Wellington. And Manu and I were down the front of the stage, and over this side was Manu's family. And I realised that I didn't just violate Manu, I violated Manu's family and his whakapapa, his tipuna, his ancestors. And I was watching his aunties and his uncles, and I was able to apologise to the whānau. And that was such a rewarding and lifting moment, because it was one of those moments, I call them keys. And if you're present in those moments, that you can see it and you can really own that space. But it was what his uncle said afterwards. He said, we have waited 20 years for that restoration of our whakapapa. So you don't realise that when you're 16 or 17 in that moment of pure anger and selfishness. So I must acknowledge that at that point in time, the universe or the spirit put us in that place, and it allowed us to face each other, and I went to step in there. But it was actually my son. He was 9 then. It was my son that he loved the Arrow. He loved watching that sitcom. And then Manu came on, and I said, I know that fella. And he goes, how do you know that guy, Dad? And I said, I gave him a hiding at school. And my 9-year-old said this, how does that make you feel? So the wisdom of the young one. And I said, I feel really stink. And he said, what would you do if you met him again? It's another big question from a 9-year-old. And I went, well, I don't know. And he said, maybe you could say sorry. 2 weeks after that moment, Manu and I crossed paths, and hadn't seen Manu for 20 years. So I believe the Spirit was pulling us into that space. And even when I saw Manu, I walked past him, and I went, that's Manu, what are you doing? I walked past him and sat down with my whānau, and I was looking at my son, I was looking at my wife and my daughter, and I was thinking to myself, my son has brought me to this point. You know, what are you going to do? You can do the right thing, or you could do the yeah, nah, I won't do that. And that's where that moment came in. But it also took me back to my father with my 9-year-old son. And I was able to share with them, and I had to change. I had to see it from a perspective of, I'd always wanted to have this conversation with my father, but I went there angry, with an intent to be angry with him, to hate him, to want to destroy him. And then I started, every time I'd have a karakia, a prayer, it was the softening of heart, the contrite of spirit, to go to the Father with love, to extend the hand. And then I realised he didn't have the tools that I've been gifted. He'd never been given those tools. So I had the cup of tea. And I was sitting there with my son on this side. And this is all part of our continued journey as father and son of his rites of passage. And I said, Dad, I'm 9 years old and you took your belt off and you beat me to the point where I felt I was going to die. And I've always wanted to know why. And he said, son, that did not happen. And with the grace of God, the hand of my mother leant over and put her hand on his knee and said, Dad, you beat this boy all the time. Mm-hmm. More than that, all of our 7 children, this boy here got beaten all the time. Now I saw my dad cry only when he was drunk. And he would cry, he would sob, and then he'd say sorry. I call it the 3 strikes as a child. You say sorry once, you say sorry twice, and then you don't get another turn to say sorry the 3rd time as a child. It's like promising. Never break your promises. And my dad started to cry. It was a real deep soul cry right from his pito of his puku. And he stood and Mum's crying and I'm crying. My son looks at me and goes, Dad, are you okay? I said, it's okay, son. And as I stood, I saw this frail man in front of me. This imposing man when I was a boy. He was a frail man. And he hugged me. And I said, Dad, you scarred my soul when I was 9. And he said, son, I am so sorry. And I was that 9-year-old boy again in my father's arms. And then he set me free. And that was the first point of trauma. So bringing all that to tonight, it's a privilege. It's an absolute honour to honour my father, to honour Manu, to honour Manu's whānau, to honour my son and my whānau.
In the movie, you said when your father was hitting you that time, and then when you were beating up Manu, you said, "I can't stop," and you couldn't. So you did stop, though. So how did you stop?
Stop it then, or stop it after that?
Yeah.
Well, right in that moment, it was the guys who pulled me off that. Afterwards, it took a long time. It took a real, like rugby. Part of being a rugby player is that I could hurt people and not get arrested. It was that kind of violence. It was that I could really hurt people and not get pulled up for it. And people used to thrive on it. People would cheer for it. It was like I was in this big arena and you had the thumbs up if you won and you had the thumbs down if you lost. And you would live that every week. And so I found a place where I could be violent and have no care. But it wasn't until 1999 was a pivotal moment on a number of fronts. 1999 was when I was put in front of the media. It was 6 o'clock news back home. It was lead story in the same day that the King of Jordan had died, and my story was on top of the lead story. So that's how much it meant to people back home. But it was a man who saw me. His name was Hewitt Jones, Brother Jones, Selwyn Jones. He saw me on TV and he rang a friend of mine and he said, you need to come on a journey. So I got in a car and headed up to a place called Tauranga, to a marae called Huria. So I actually had to go back to my roots and learn a piece about myself that I didn't know. And that was my cultural side. It was like I travelled the world with this hole inside me. I didn't want to belong to this Māori side. but it is who I am. And he shared with me, who were these ancestors on this waka, Takitumu? Do you know the significance of these ancestors? And he started bringing these pieces, like the whole time is about gathering pieces of a puzzle. And as a picture becomes clearer, you understand what you have to do. But he said this to me. He said, Norm, you're either tika or tika. You're either true or you're full of it. And that resonated with me. He goes, go home, clean your backyard up. Not just the physical, but the spiritual. And that was the moment that I found there was a great big smile inside me. And I rang my girlfriend then, who's now my wife, Arlene, and I said, I know what I have to do. And it was mapped out from that moment. And every part has culminated into this part.
What was it? What did you do?
So I went home and emptied all the alcohol out. I took away that was the place where I was allowed to go. But I consciously chose that. And then I made a conscious decision not to choose it. And I made promises. Every night I got on my knees and prayed. I'd never prayed before. And little by little, these promises became a reality. I had people ringing me up and saying, come to AA. So I went to AA. Awesome. Go to meetings. Go to hui. Sit and listen to people. I had mentors around me. And all the time it was just about gathering tools. And each little step got me stronger into the place where I realised that this was my calling. I've had some amazing mentors. So mentors were a key for me. Faisila Lashley, who was the first woman to manage a women's prison in New Zealand and the first woman to manage a men's prison in New Zealand. She taught me about patience. Trevor Grice, who gave me some of the equations around how alcohol can affect the brain. Frank Oliver, who was one of my rugby coaches. So I've had many great mentors since then. So 1999 was the moment where I could look in the mirror and not dislike the person that was looking back. And from that moment on, my wife was my angel. Because in 1999 we'd just started dating. I think we had 2 dates. Queenstown happened. 6 o'clock news. It was big stuff back home. It was huge. And Arlene came around and I said, you need to get out. Whatever this relationship may or potentially could be. And we talk about hope. She gave this to me. She said, I see something in you. And then she said, I believe in you. And she gave me this little piece of hope. And that's when I made my promise. I will never behave like this ever again. And that's what I did.
What did she see in you? What do you think she saw in you?
She must have seen something.
What?
I don't know. We've never had that. What was it? I don't know. Maybe that's another part of the puzzle to ask. But she must have seen something. And I look at that as like, isn't hope what it's about? It's about hope. Mm-hmm. To give hope. Even if it's a little bit of hope. Yeah. And if you can hold on to that and have the strength around that with people, mm-hmm. I suppose it comes back to humanity. Humanity before culture. But I don't know. I don't know what she saw.
What gave you that little bit of hope?
That's what she said to me.
Just
I see something.
That.
She said, I don't want to go. I see something in you. And then I believe in you. Those 2 little pieces. And I went, okay, I'll never do this again. And that was the beginning. Like someone believed in me. Like my father didn't believe in me. You know? Rugby was a way that I could pretend to be somebody. But it was really never me. And in the end, I disliked who I'd become. I didn't like being an All Black.
And so how do you describe yourself now? What do you do now?
I work with a number of organisations across New Zealand and into Australia, helping them build culture based on behaviour, consciousness, and it's mostly all men, and do it in a way. I used my mum's cup of tea metaphor. So my mum, my grandmother always used to. My mum would always send me to my grandmother's place. And as I walked into my grandmother's house, my grandmother would always have something baking. So the smell was always something, oh yeah, that's good for my puku. And then she'd say, put the jug on, we'll have a cup of tea. And then she'd tell me, you've been a little bugger lately. You know, she'd be, just tell me off about this, you haven't been a good boy. And I kept thinking, how did my nan know this? Oh, well, Mum used to ring her up and say, you better talk to this boy. So the metaphor of the cup of tea was a way that you can have a conversation and share a message and the wisdom that comes from that cup of tea. And, you know, when I look back and I think of people of real, you know, if you go back 2,500 years when Socrates was teaching and he said our children are but only empty vessels and forever will retain for what is first poured into them. That's a cup of tea, you know. And if we have not continued to take on those lessons, we have to keep repeating it until we do learn them, you know. So, yeah, to describe myself, I know that I'm a better father today. Every day is another day that I can be better, a better husband, a better son, and a better person. And that's the goal every day. As I really wanted to treat people the way I'd like to be treated, and to have some fairness within that. So when I see unfairness, I will always step into that. But I don't go in there now with this sense of anger or intent. I go in there with this, okay, I think love will conquer all if it comes through the right channel, you know? Yeah.
Do you get angry now, ever?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, isn't that the nature of man or humanity, is that we still get frustrated? And I kind of go, I use this tool, I go, is it mine or is it theirs? If it's theirs, own it. If it's mine, change it. You know? Because you don't have to why should you deal with mine? You've got your own to deal with. You know? So I just kind of use that as a wee bit of a tool just to go through this process and go, well, if it's my stuff, I better own it. But if it's your stuff, I go, you deal with it. It's your stuff.
Oh, nice.
You know?
Okay.
It's not mine, but I can help you deal with it if you want. Just have a cup of tea. You know? Yeah.
And you have some little videos too online of a cup of tea where you talk about making changes and.
We kind of tested that in the frame with Fiona. Fiona Apanui, I must acknowledge Te Amakura production. Fiona Apanui is an amazing, amazing person. She took the duty of care for this documentary and the people in it. She always kept asking, is my dad okay? Is your dad okay? Is your mum okay? She kept asking us all the time. I said, they're fine. But it was her, she goes, we should come around and we should start these little wee, what they call them, little wee clips. There's something, fancy name for them. So we started that. And I kind of went, oh, okay. Let's see how that goes. But starting the conversation was always the intent of this documentary. To start a conversation and see where it goes. So I'm sure out in the audience you have some questions that you may have, or something that you may want to ask.
You're the panel. The audience is the panel. So, panel, ask some questions. Yes.
So,
do you need a microphone? Here.
Well, first, I'd like to thank you for the tremendous courage and the gift that you give us all by telling your story and so responsibly and with such humility. And I would love to hear if you could tell us about what was it that caused you to be able to change from an outward expression of your pain to self-responsibility? What was it that helped you shift to inner life?
Part of that was to have a moment in life where you were just about right at the bottom. To hit that rock bottom, sometimes you cannot change until you see the reality of your own destruction. And that was mine. So that was mine. And then somebody coming in giving you a gift and being present in the gift. Because when you're at the lowest of low and somebody gives you a gift, it's like this light goes on and the light comes into the darkness and it feels okay to be able to share. It was also the gift of kōrero, discussion. To have a real discussion, not just like, how do you think the guys will play tomorrow? A real discussion of heart. And then connect that with your soul. So it's the 3 points of head, heart, and soul. And that came through Hirowini Jones. So there's always a navigator or a guide or a moment, is to be ready for that moment to be present. So that was mine. So Hirowini was a connection. My wife, my partner was a connection. So there was all these little bits, and then I kind of went, this plus this plus this equals this. It was like I went, I didn't get into trouble every time I drank, but every time I was drunk, I was always in trouble. Maybe if I took that part out, there would be no more trouble. Oh, wow. 1 + 1 = 2, not 7. I kind of started rationalising it in that real pragmatist way. Just kind of like did these equations. So there was Queenstown was the cathartic, and then from that the phoenix rise.
Do you want to tell them what Queensland was a little bit
Queenstown.
more?
So when the news report said Norm Hewitt battles the booze, it was 1999. The All Blacks, we'd just been to an All Black camp, and we'd trained with the SAS for 2 weeks. And then I was playing for the Hurricanes, one of the professional teams back in New Zealand, and they had a camp down in Queenstown. So we were on rations for a whole 2 weeks. There was dehydration, there was sleep deprivation, and then I was going down to Queenstown, which is the party capital of New Zealand. And we got down there, and one of the local bars said, all those boys can come and drink as much as they like. And so I kind of went, yeah, I'm up for that. And I just destroyed myself. But actually I was always in turmoil. I was pretending. In the world, it's like, there's this documentary called The Mask We Wear. The mask of what we want people to see is very shallow to what is really behind the mask. We want people to see this part, but just behind there is that real person. And I learned how to see that when I was a boy. At parties. When adults walked through the door, I had this radar going. Celia described it. So again, one of these key tools, she said, vulnerable young people have this radar that goes out and bounces back like a submarine. And it goes like this. And if you're really adept at it, it hits like 1,000 beats. And you can tell who is safe, who's going to be okay, and who's not going to be okay like that. And then we kind of stopped doing it, but I've realised that radar is my key. I continuously do that because it allows me to see just past the mask. And then I see people, real people. I see the weight of people. I see the heaviness of people. And sometimes it's just to go up and put the hand on the chest and say, it's going to be okay. And then you feel this weight lift. So Queenstown gave me that back, to look at me and be real to that person, not the mask. So I don't wear a mask anymore. And that's freedom in its own right. This is who I am. I'm this person sitting here trying to be authentic. Not trying, I am authentic all the time. And if you can get to that place, that's when you're free. You don't have to look over your shoulder. You don't have to pretend to do something that you don't want to do. You don't have to turn up to something that you don't want to turn up to because it appeases somebody else. What about you? Because you actually want to be able to do that, not because you have to. Why do you have to do it? You know, so that's kind of like where I got that space from. So Queenstown was a significant moment. It brought huge shame, but it actually set me free. So to the bottom, and that was mine. Any other question? Mato.
Check. Thank you again for sharing your story. One question that I had, I noticed that your parents were in your wedding photos, and I have a feeling that on camera, that was a portion of the healing and the confronting. How did you handle those years till then?
Yeah, great question. With great hardness. It was weighty. I had to be patient. I had to wait until I always thought it was my father, but it was me. I was an impatient person. I wanted that to happen now. And if you push something too hard, it just doesn't happen. So I got to the point where another mentor said to me, the universe will put everything right. There'll be moments, and be aware and awake, be conscious to when those moments, and I call them pieces of gold now. When that piece of gold is ready, you will know. So, and seeding, I believe in seeding. You seed a conversation, and that seed could be dropped 10 years prior. 4 years before I had the conversation with my father, I was speaking at a conference at Easter around forgiveness. My topic was forgiveness, and I talked about, I had this topic, there were 1,000 people in this room, and I'm talking about if Jesus Christ at the Garden of Gethsemane, the night before he was put on the cross, said, Father, please forgive them, they do not know what they do. If that was that moment, I stood there and I stopped. And I said, I am talking about forgiveness, but I have not forgiven my own father. So how can I talk about forgiveness if my own home hasn't got this forgiveness? And so that night, we have whānau kai, and part of that is, again, the seed is to have to gnaw, to eat together, is the breaking of the bread and the giving and sharing. And so after that, I said to my son, son, can you please stand and let everyone know that I have something to say? Again, it was one of those reflective moments. And my son Alexander stood up and said, Dad would like to say something. And I stood up and I said, Dad, I was speaking today and about forgiveness, and I realised that I haven't forgiven you. But I actually need your help. There's a piece that you play which is really important to help me forgive you. So when you're ready, can you please let me know and invite me in for a cup of tea? That was 4 years prior. And then for that 4 years, I'd walk past his place and go, I wonder when he's going to invite me in for a cup of tea. And I'd continue to ask that question. Then I'd get frustrated, and then I realised, actually, he's not going to invite you. You have to invite yourself. He doesn't have the words, the language, or the tools. And so I said, Dad, I'm ready to have that cup of tea. And he goes, okay. And then when I first posed the documentary to my mum and dad, they got really angry. I said, Mum, Dad, I'm not asking your permission. I'm just letting you know I'm going to make this documentary and I'd like you to be part of it. My dad just went into that place when I was a boy. He was so angry. And the intent of that, how dare you, you selfish, it's going to hurt your family. And I said, Dad, I believe it's going to free us from that dark space. And that again was the seed. And I went down and had a cup of tea with my dad a couple of weeks later, and I said, Dad, I'd like to know, what do I say at your funeral? What is the legacy that you're leaving? What is the conversation that I stand up? Because I see many people want to say the truth at a funeral, but they say half-truths. Because at the back of the kitchen, I hear them talk about, oh, he was a womanizer, and he was a drinker, and he was a bad person, but they would never say it at the front. And I said, Dad, I don't want to be that person. I want to know what am I going to say? And about 2 or 3 weeks later, we were going to a rugby game, my son's rugby game, and I said, Alexander, ring Koko up and see if he wants to come. And we were driving there, and it was, again, one of these moments. The seeds had been planted. And my father turned around and goes, I get it. I was listening to the national radio, and there was a story about a daughter forgiving her father, and the father owning what he had done. I'll do the documentary. Mum and I talked, and we'll do the documentary. So it was about the seeding. The seeding is really crucial, but it's about also the conversations, thinking about how do you engage in a conversation. But it's trusting here. It's trusting the voice in your heart. The voice in your heart, if we don't turn that on, boys get told, harden up, stop crying like a girl, stop being a pussy. We take all that and we just kind of like, we can't share. We're not allowed to be emotional, So we suppress all that, and yet these are the voices that continuously go on down in our soul and our hearts. Is we have these conversations with ourselves, men, and we don't share it with us because it shows that we're going to be weak. My greatest strength is my vulnerability. To be vulnerable is to be true. Why? Because it makes me human, like everybody else. We're vulnerable people. We're not perfect. No one's perfect. So what are we aiming for? So that's enabled a conversation. So I see my father's end of life, but I know his legacy now. And he's such a great man for that. At 76 years old school, to own his stuff. His stuff. And when I went back to him again, another one of these cup of teas, after the documentary, and I said, Dad, thank you for freeing me. And he said, son, I'm pleased you are free, but there's an 11-year-old trapped in me. And I said, Dad, I know Granddad's not here, but his photo sits up on the wall. When you find the words you want to give back to Granddad, I'll come and stand next to you. So again, it's that power of the Father and the Son. As my son taught me, I am a student as much as a teacher, as he is a teacher as much as a student, that I am the same for my own father. And these are just tools. And if we enlighten those tools, we'd be better people. Just a little bit. I talk about half a degree. If I was plotting a course, and I just changed that course by half a degree, I end up 1,000 nautical miles from the destination that I thought I was going to go. If I keep plotting those half a degrees, and it changes about a half a degree. It's not about this. Half a degree. Today I'm going to do this. Today I'm going to acknowledge somebody. Today I'm going to do a gesture of kindness. Today I'm going to pay it forward to somebody. Today I'm just going to go up to somebody and say, how are you? Our societies, and I love this, everyone hugs each other. We do that back home, but we only do it with certain cultures, not everybody. That's an acknowledgement that I see you, I hear you, I believe in you. Just in that opportunity every day to acknowledge people. Sorry, I answer questions quite long now. Do a lot of talking. Yes, sir.
Thank you for sharing that. So I was wondering, when you decided you had your moment of clarity and you didn't want to be in all black anymore, was that because you entirely didn't want that, or because you knew it was encouraging you to keep acting the same way?
Good question. I didn't want to be an All Black anymore because I chose the behaviour that an All Black shouldn't be doing. But I was also encouraged in that environment because we were sponsored by alcohol. So I was trying to be this person. When I was a little boy, my grandmother said to me, "Please and thank you will take you around the world." And then I lost that when I became a man in an All Black jersey because everyone came up to me and said, "You're awesome." You know, I got overwhelmed by the worldly things. And then I disliked who I'd become because I dishonoured the jersey. You know, so, don't know if that answers your question. But I just didn't want to be that person anymore. I wanted to change because every part of all these actions weren't giving me a positive reaction. You know, because there's a cause and effect. Cause, effect. And if you don't own it, you let someone else own it. But actually, I have to own it. I said, we have whānau hui at home. I mean, we karakia every morning and every night. Every morning, every night as a whānau. It's such an important space for us because we give thanks in the day. You know, we are present at the moment, which is also the present, the past, and the future is already here and gone. Now we're back into the present, but it's already the past. I want to know what every day that I am alive, that I look at what I've done, and then I clean the slate for the next day. Then I look what I've done. You know, being an All Black doesn't define who I am. This doesn't define who I am. Muhammad Ali, who I had the privilege of meeting in 1993, said this: if a man at 50 still behaves and thinks like he did when he was 20, has wasted 30 years of his life. I don't want to waste 30 years. I've wasted enough years being ignorant in this space, you know. I can get on my tangent, sorry. Yes, sir.
So first, I want to thank you also for what you're doing and what you shared with us. I work with a lot of young men, and a lot of young women, and a lot of teens and young people. Can you say any more about what you've done talking to young people or teens nationally or globally? I'd really like to hear more about that. And also, how long will you be in town?
So I leave on Sunday. Tomorrow we're going to
he's going to go to Farrington High School and to Ko'olau, to HYCF, to see the kids.
I believe my role is just a navigator, or the catalyst to start a conversation. Because in your own backyard, there are lots of people who have a story. And everywhere I go, I've just been on the Chatham Islands, and the Chatham Islands is 900 kilometres. It's isolated. There's 602 people on this island. There are 3 tribes, and there's tribal politics. And the young people, they keep talking about the young people. And I said, why do you use the young people as the excuse? Oh, because it's their behaviour. It's not their behaviour, it's the adults' behaviour. We mirror image society. My son will say the things that I say. To work with young people is to sit with young people and say, what do you want? Because we've been telling them what they should be doing. And that's the voice that keeps coming back to me. Don't come in and tell us what to do because you've had your shot. The actual wisdom sits with our young people. Even that place of chaos, but there's lots of people sitting here that has a story. It's finding that strength. And that's what's come through with the likes of the Chathams. I said to these men, would you be comfortable sharing a story? Because this young person's going through exactly where you've been. And as my mentor said to me, see these scars, all these little wee lines on my face, these are the lines of travelling. I've already travelled the journey that you are about to travel, and some of the lessons you're going to have to learn on your own, but some of them I'm going to help navigate with you. But I can't do it for you. And then I think of the village. It takes a village to raise a child. So who is the village? Who is the village? It shouldn't just be left up to one person. Let's encourage the village to come forward. And they're there. The village is there. So 3 men who I just, again, I got on this plane, this guy pushes in front of me, and I'm going, whoa, he's not in a very good space today. And that's what I was thinking. I reckon I should have a cup of tea with that guy. He goes and sits right at the back of the plane, and I sit right up the front. Everyone sits down, and how come that guy comes and sits next to me? I didn't tell him to. And I said, how are you? And he goes, it's not good. Why not? My best friend's just committed suicide. I feel hopeless. And for 2 hours we have a conversation. And I said, would you share if I come back? Because there are other men on the island who sit in this dark place. And he said, it takes you to be the catalyst for us to find the courage to sit in our own community, to be vulnerable. And so that's what I do across. I use the cup of tea model. I also use food. It's always good to have food. And I ask. I become the point of question. So what do you think about this? We use a bit of philosophy, reading. Have you heard the parable of the golden eagle? The golden eagle, the chicken, the eagle that put an egg in the chicken coop. Use parables, and it's the power of the conversation afterwards that actually engages people. Have you read The Cave? The Cave is another point of, if you always look at the basis of the cave is, the cave and there's a fire behind the people. Aristotle's cave. We use that in conversation, and we talk. And the point is that I just go, so what do you think the cave's about? And then you have this wealth of conversation. There's no such thing as a wrong answer. It's the value of the conversation. So Aristotle is there, Socrates is there. The wealth of the Hawaiian culture is right behind it, because all those stories are always there. Yes, we just don't tap into it. We think it has to be, let's bring a program over from America, or let's bring a program over from the UK, or New Zealand's got this great program, but it's here.
And just by yourself, you did a restorative intervention by yourself with your son's advice, and it's really remarkable. And I'm sorry it's kind of late. We have to wrap up. But Norm also has the video, the DVD if you want to buy it for $20. He brought some, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
he brought some if you want to buy one. And he is available if you want to talk to him afterwards.
I'm going to be hanging around, so not hanging around, but it'll be kind of like a mixing and mingling.
And if you ever want to learn more about restorative justice, we have the Hawaiʻi Friends of Restorative Justice. We've been doing this work for 20 years, and we've done a number of pilot projects. We've published over 50 papers and a couple books, and have done work in all areas. And it's just been such a great pleasure, and thank you all for coming tonight. Thanks.
So, what time? 11:30? 11:31? But before I go, I'd like to finish with a song. This song is, because I've done my pipiha, I've had a kōrero. The song represents love. It says, if I translate it, it's not translated perfectly, but all is not lost. It's come from our tipuna, our ancestors. All it is love. And it goes like this. E hara I te mea no nai nei I te aroa no ngā tupuna I tuku iho I tuku Kapiti hono tātai hono, tonga mate ki te honga mate. Kapiti hono tātai hono. Te ongora iaia kia tātou te ongora. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā koutou katoa. Kia ora.